Good evening and welcome to the January 2016 Richardson Law Office's Legal Hangout. I'm Steve Richardson, and we're a little late this month doing our Hangout. It's ordinarily done on the fourth Thursday of the month at 5 p.m. But yesterday I was encountering some difficulties with Google and their Hangouts on the Air feature. I think there's a browser configuration or some such thing that prevented me from airing the episode last night. But I figured it out today, Friday, the 29th, and figured okay, we'll just do it 5 o'clock p.m. one day later. So here we are in January, and for those of you who are parents of high school seniors that are going to be graduating this year, and if they're college bound, you're probably looking at your financial aid options. In January, the new FAFSA form comes out from the U.S. Department of Education, the free application for federal student aid. And you're probably looking to starting working on that to submit and get that process going for the fall. If you're the parent of a college student who's going back to school next fall, you're probably doing the same thing. Of course, it has to be done every year. And so what I thought I'd do for this month, as you're starting to work on the FAFSA form, is to talk about the form itself, some do's and don'ts, some ideas and ways to approach it that will allow you to proceed more intelligently and hopefully more informed, especially if this is your first time doing it, as far as what has to be done with the FAFSA form. So I'm going to go over a few things that I hope will be helpful to you. Now, first of all, be aware this is you want to start as soon as possible. Different schools have different deadlines for when the form is due. Now, if you're going back to school, you probably already know what your deadline is, and there's only one school you're going to be submitting to, so it's a lot more straightforward. If you're a parent of a high school senior and you're still looking at different schools, haven't been accepted yet, don't know where you're going just yet, you may be dealing with different deadlines. So I guess the first thing is to make sure you know what the FAFSA form deadlines are for the schools that you're looking at, to make sure you get it in on time. Now, the other thing you want to do as soon as possible is file your tax return. Your income is obviously a key part of the FAFSA form, and you want it to be as accurate as possible. Now, it is possible to fill out the form before you've done your taxes. You can estimate income from the previous year, but it's obvious. And then once you do file your tax return, you can go back and amend the FAFSA form to put in the actual figures from your 2015 tax return. But it's really easier to do and fill out the form, and I'll get into that in a minute, if you've already filed your tax return. So I would recommend that if you have the time, if your deadline for your school isn't too soon, that you do your tax return and get that done, because that'll make things easier. Now, there's going to be some information that you're going to need to gather together to prepare the form. You can do it online, but if you have all the information right there in front of you, all gathered and ready to go, it's going to be easier to fill out the form when you do that. So first thing you should do is gather together the information you're going to need. You're going to need your name and social security number. That should be on your tax return. And the information on your citizenship status and marital status. Information on as the parent, your educational background, your education level. If you're the student filling it out, and what is the dependency status as far as being independent of your parents. Your parents' names, date of birth, and social security numbers. That'd be important. Your parents' adjusted gross income from the previous tax year. Now, obviously, if you have your tax return already filled out and filed, and that information is ready to go, obviously that step's going to be easier. And then your parents' earned income from the previous tax year, along with any unearned income, for example, Social Security benefits, pensions, maybe some disability income, unemployment income, any other income other than income from job or earned income. Your adjusted gross income, if you as the student, not the parent, had income, you would need that information as well. Or if your parents are not involved, if you're an adult, or if you're an emancipated child, your parents aren't involved, then just your income information. And then any unearned household income. So you gather all that income together, and you're ready to go. You're ready to fill out the form. But the FAFSA form, if you've never done it before, can be a bit intimidating. You may have heard different things about it. And there are some common myths about the FAFSA form that you should be aware of, so that you're not too intimidated by it. You realize it's no big deal, and you're also not misinformed about it. You say, well, I don't have to, for example, there's one that says, well, I don't have to include my parents' income because I support myself. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are particular guidelines to determine whether you are considered a dependent of your parents. So you need to make that determination. Are you a dependent of your parents? So be careful to read the instructions and know whether you are a dependent. I can't fill out the form until my parents or I fill out our tax returns. So as I just said, it's better if you filled out your tax returns, but you don't have to. You can estimate it from income from the previous year, because some schools are their deadlines maybe before April 15th. You may not have filed your tax return yet, so that's not necessarily true. My grades aren't good enough to get any financial aid. Well, no, that's not necessarily true either, and you shouldn't think that. You had to make what's called satisfactory academic progress, as defined by the school you attend, to continue receiving financial aid. So this is a situation, and this is a myth that that you're in college and you may not think your grades are good enough to get financial aid, but that's not the connection. You just have to be making satisfactory academic progress in the current year to apply for financial aid in the future year. I'm too old to qualify. Nope, not true. Any age is not a factor on your application, so don't worry about age. It's not. Sometimes you might be going back to school. Maybe you graduated high school, got a job, it's been a few years, and now you decided to go to college and get your degree. There is no age factor here, so don't think that. Application is too hard to fill out. Some people think, oh, geez, I got to fill out this big government form, and they just get intimidated by it or scared by it, and you really shouldn't be. This isn't something you need to worry about. It's easy to submit. It can be done online. In fact, as I said, if you've already filled out your tax return, and one of the advantages to filling out your tax return and filing it before you do the FAFSA form, not only having the accurate information, is that the tax information can be imported into the FAFSA form electronically. If you've already filed your tax return, you can transfer the data to the form. And there's also some guided assistance to assist you with each question. And then it's somewhat of an intelligent form. It serves up relevant questions. So really don't be intimidated by it. It's not that hard to fill out. I won't qualify because I or my parents make too much money. That's a common myth, and I hear that a lot. from people I talk to folks and about financial aid and say, oh, we make too much money. We're not going to get any financial aid. Not necessarily true. Not everything is needs-based. There are many different financial aid options available that are not needs-based. And the form is used not only by the U.S. government, but by other lending institutions and by your school. You're going to see at some point, once you submit that FAFSA form and they get that information in the student aid report and that form, they're going to put together a financial aid offer to you. And that's going to have all sorts of different things in it. And not all of them are needs-based. So don't think that, oh, we make too much money, it's not worth filling out. Fill it out. I guess it goes back to the old saying, the worst they can say is no, but it's something that you should do anyway, because you don't know what may be offered by the school, and you really should fill that out. So don't worry about that. Don't think that. Now, there are some common mistakes that are made in filling out the FAFSA form, and you don't want to make these mistakes. One is not reading it carefully. This is a form with instructions, and you want to make sure you understand what these questions are. Some of them deal with defined terms, and you want to make sure you know what those definitions are. So read it carefully. Okay, don't assume. Read through it. And not reading it carefully, this can come into, as I said, definitions of terms. You might misunderstand the household size. There's a number of family members, and what these family members are defined in the form. So make sure you understand the definition before you answer that question. Amount of income tax paid. This is the amount of tax that you paid on your income, and it's not the same as your adjusted gross income. That's tax paid, not income itself. Another example of defined terms that you need to be sure of. Legal guardianship, asking about that. It asks if you are or were in legal guardianship, and make sure that you understand the definition of that term, because it does not include your parents. Not completing the form. You might rush through it and not really realize you're not answering all of the questions. Go through the form carefully and make sure you're answering all the questions. And also, or just not filling it out at all. Just keep putting it off and procrastinating, figuring out that you're not going to qualify, thinking that you're not going to qualify for anything. And you'd be missing out on a really big opportunity, or you well could be. Inputting incorrect information. Make sure that, double check everything before you submit it. You can go back and change it, but just be careful and be thorough and get it right the first time. It'll save you time and effort and anxiety and everything else. Just go through it carefully and make sure you're filling it out correctly. Every answer you give has to be as accurate as possible, and reread the form to make sure it's right. And make sure they match up to all official documents that that happens. Not signing it. You fill it all out and you don't sign it. Okay, you be careful to do that. It might be hard to believe. How could you just submit the form and not sign it? But that's important. You sign it with your personal identification number, your PIN. If you don't have a PIN, then you can reapply for one. But don't quit right before the finish line by not properly signing electronically. Not reporting parent information. You fill out your information, but you don't fill out parent information. If you are a dependent of your parents, then that information needs to be provided. So don't overlook that. So this is even true if the IRS doesn't consider you a dependent. So don't think it necessarily in terms of a dependent for tax purposes, excuse me, but a dependent according to the definitions of the U.S. Department of Education for the purposes of the form. So make sure you understand that definition. Not being prepared. Again, I said, make sure you have all your information together. I went over what information you will need to gather together, and make sure you have it there when you fill out the form. And finally, not using the IRS data retrieval tool. All right, that is a simple way of making sure everything's accurate, and it just makes the form completion easier because you just imported the information in from your tax return that had been provided in that Form 1040. Now, you fill out the form, you submit it. What happens next? Well, at some point you're going to get back something called a student aid report. That's the response. You'll get it in about 4 to 6 weeks, and if you submit the form electronically, it's more like 2 to 3 weeks. You get it back. It summarizes all the information that you put into your FAFSA form, and it includes your expected family contribution. And also this information is sent to the schools as well, not just to you, but sent to the schools that you list on your FAFSA form, or school if you're going back to school. So they get that information and as part of their review for their financial aid package. So once you receive the student aid report, a couple things you're going to want to make sure you do. First thing is go over it and make sure it's accurate. I know you double check the FAFSA form when you filled it out. You might have been very careful, looked it through, checked it twice, but make sure what comes back in that student aid report is accurate. Because if it isn't, you're going to want to make some changes, make sure that the school knows about it, because you don't want to miss out on something because there is an inaccuracy in that report. And you also have the opportunity to update the information. As I said, if you filled out the FAFSA form before you filled out your tax return, you're going to have to go back and correct the income information and tax information that was requested from the estimates, the actual number from your tax return. So be sure to do that. Now, I mentioned an expected family contribution a minute ago, and that is a key number. All right, that has to do with a determination of need. We were talking about earlier whether or not you make too much money for financial aid. Well, that calculation of the expected family contribution is what that number, that index number, is going to be on your student aid report. So that's an important number to consider. And it's calculated according to a formula by the U.S. Department of Education that considers your family's taxed and untaxed income, assets and benefits such as unemployment or Social Security. And it also includes your family size and the number of family members who will be attending college or career school during that year. So you have to consider, well, it's not only this child that this child trying to educate, but you may have other children, or from a student's point of view, siblings that are already in school, and that's considered as well in that calculation. Now, financial aid officers at the schools are going to take that EFC, expected family contribution, and they're going to deduct it from the cost of attendance. Determine what your need is for financial aid. Obviously, there's a calculation done on what the Department of Education feels you can, your parents or you can afford to contribute towards the cost of education. And then whatever, if there's a gap, if there's some left over, then that's that needs-based calculation for financial aid, and that's used by the schools. Now, this information is used to determine eligibility for federal Pell Grants, for subsidized Stafford loans through the Direct Loan Program, federal supplemental educational opportunity grants, federal Perkins loans, although Perkins loans are somewhat limited this year. They may be going the way of the dodo, they may be going out or the program may be canceled, but that comes into play as well. So that obviously is an important number. And I was thinking about grants, Pell Grants and Federal Educational Opportunity Grants. That's another reason why you want to make sure that you fill out the form and get it in as soon as possible, because schools are given a certain amount of money for Pell Grants and for these educational opportunity grants, and you may qualify for them, but if you're too late in submitting, there may not be any money left. They may have already given it all out. So you want to try and be as close to the front of the line for that sort of thing as you can, because these grants are grants. They're not loans. You don't have to pay them back. Okay? So that's obviously the first money you're going to want to grab if you qualify on a needs basis. So make sure you get in there and apply as soon as possible. And also, although you can get loans under the Stafford program, the federal Stafford program, that are not needs-based, they are not subsidized. And let me just digress for a moment on the difference between those two loans so that you understand the importance of them. While you're in school, you have an in-school deferment. So you borrow the money, let's say it's for your freshman year, and you don't have to pay it back till you graduate. Well, that's going to be 4 years, 3-4 years later. Okay. And during that time, interest on that loan is going to accrue. Now, if you have a subsidized loan, the federal government will pay that interest. And when you graduate, you'll owe what you borrowed back in your freshman year. But if you have an unsubsidized loan, that interest will continue to accrue during the in-school deferment and will capitalize or roll into the principal, the amount of money that you owed, and that will be the amount of money that you have to pay back after graduation. So if you have an unsubsidized loan, you can end up repaying a lot more, depending on when you borrowed it when you graduate, than what you originally borrowed. So if you can get these subsidized Stafford loans, that's a good thing. There are different things that are taken into account for the cost of attendance, tuition and fees, the cost of room and board, or living expenses for students who do not fit within the school's room and board, or do not contract with the school for room and board. May have off-campus housing, rent an apartment, that sort of thing. You're not in a dorm. Cost of books, supplies, transportation, loan fees, etc. An allowance for child care and other dependent care, if that's appropriate. Costs related to a disability, what you might need to do if you're disabled and attending school, and the reasonable costs for eligible study abroad programs. So all of this comes into play with money that you're going to need and money that'll be considered as part of the cost of attendance for financial aid purposes. So that's what's considered the cost of attendance. So that's it for this month's Legal Hangout. We got you through the FAFSA portion of it and submitting it. We're going to talk next month a little bit more about your strategy for financial aid and what you want to look into and ways of paying for it, so you don't end up with a lot of debt once you graduate. So take what you've heard today. Certainly you can download my book, Applying for Federal Financial Aid, the Definitive Guide for Students and Parents. You can download that. It has all sorts of information about the application process. So once you get through that, you've got it. You've got the FAFSA form submitted. Maybe by next month, the next Hangout, you will have gotten your student aid report back, and we're going to take the next step in what you do at that point in the application process. So our next Hangout is going to be on February 25th at 5 p.m. Hopefully there'll be no technical difficulties that will cause a delay in airing the program. And we'll go from there. So see you in February. Hopefully you don't have too much snow in your area or won't have more storms or shoveling between now and then. And I'll see you on February 25th. Oh, and just a reminder, if you found this useful, help me out and click that that thumbs up button down there, that like button, that you like the video. That'll help folks find the video when they search YouTube. And even better, if you like the channel that much, you subscribe. Not only are there monthly legal hangouts on different topics on the fourth Thursday of the month, but we also have regular videos that are informational videos that we release to the channel, and you want to be notified of those, so you can always click to subscribe as well. Other than that, I'll see you next month.